real substance of what metaphysics and what all of this is all about. Otherwise, you'd never understand it. And that was what was happening to me when I first made the Nostradamus connection. I was in the beginning, baby steps. Of course, I thought I knew the answers. I thought I had it all figured out. I kept saying I have the whole theory of reincarnation figured out. I know how it all works. But I found out it's not like that. I was thinking in a linear progression because that's the way we're taught. But then I've since found out there are many strange twists and turns and things that I would never have thought of at that time. And in the beginning, when I would get a strange and unusual theory that would come through, I was hesitant. I would say, well, now I've got this all figured out. I don't want somebody rocking my boat. I don't want somebody giving me something that's going to get me all mixed up because I have it all figured out. But then I began thinking about it. If I was not willing to explore, if I was not willing to look at new answers, even though they might upset my belief system, if I was not willing to look at those things, then I was no better than the church that tells you what to believe. It says you believe this and don't ask questions. So I began looking at these theories and these new things that they were telling me, and now it makes sense. But in those days, it was a daring departure from the way I had thought everything worked. It just occurred to me, I wondered if I had not accepted the new ideas and these radical beliefs that were being thrown at me, new ways of thinking, I wonder if my work would have stopped right there. It would have come to a screeching halt, maybe, because they said, well, if you can't understand this little piece, how are you going to understand the rest? And I would have been still writing these simpler books about the going through time and the history. I love those books. I always think sometimes wouldn't it be nice if I could go back to those days, the ones I wrote in the early part of my career. But maybe that would have been all I'd done. Maybe I would not have explored. Maybe I would not have gone further in my work. And my work keeps growing and growing now. But anyway, that's where I was 20 years ago when I started with the Nostradamus material. I was working with a woman who just wanted to see if she'd had a past life. She was not really into metaphysics. She didn't really understand it. She didn't know who Nostradamus was. She couldn't even pronounce his name later. That's what made it more believable. But I call her an ordinary woman, but she had 10 children. One was deaf and mute, and she had to learn sign language to help that child. She had never finished high school, and she was working 2 jobs to try to help support this large family. So you can't say it's someone who set out to produce a hoax to fool the world. And believe me, I've been accused of everything. They all say, well, it couldn't have happened. You must have made it up. Well, other people say, you've got to be the best fiction writer in the world. And I said, if you could show me how this could have happened as a fraud, as a hoax, I would really like to know. But anyway, with the woman, we were just seeing if she had a past life. She went back to a time where she was a student, a male student of Nostradamus, living in the 1500s in France. And I since found out after that, with the sessions we had, and the research was that he did have students at that time. He was a doctor, and he was teaching under the disguise of teaching these students medicine. But they were really learning in secret, and they were meeting in secret to learn how to go into trance, to learn how to see the future, to learn how to heal, all the methods that he was doing. And he had lots and lots of spies that were watching him all the time, because the church said the only way he could be having the miraculous cures that he had as a doctor, he had to be working with the devil. So people were watching him all the time. So these students were doing a very dangerous thing by coming to him in secret and learning, because their lives were in danger if they would have found out. He said one time if they knew what he was doing, he would have either been killed or his land would have been taken away and he would have been put into prison. So the students that Nostradamus had were also taking the same chance as they came to study with him. So she was a student of his at that time, and I kept thinking, wow, Nostradamus, I knew who he was. I'd never studied his prophecies, but I knew he was the greatest psychic that ever lived. So I was thinking, I wonder what a student could tell me about this great man. I figured that had to be the only thing that could happen, was that she could tell me about him. So I started asking questions about the way he worked and what he was teaching, and et cetera, et cetera. That's when everything got very strange, because as she was talking to me about him, something strange happened, and it was as though she was conversing with somebody and then repeating it back to me, and she said, "He wants to speak to you." Now, anybody who has ever done past life regression or had a past life session done knows that does not happen. Nobody in the scene with the person in the past life will be aware of what's going on, because you are speaking to that person in the other life, and the others are not included. They're just living their lives. But if it is true that Nostradamus was the greatest psychic that ever lived, somehow he knew that his student was having a strange experience. So he said, "He wants to speak to you." And then she began a conversation where she would talk to them and then repeat what they were saying, what Nostradamus was saying, and then she would repeat to him what I was saying. She was a go-between. So it's not channeling, and it's not hypnosis as the way it's normally done. I consider it to be time travel, because we were actually there in that time period conversing with him. And she said, "He says that he has been looking for a link to the future, because he could see that his prophecies, when he wrote them down, were not being correctly interpreted in our time, and that the things he saw, the things he predicted, were going to come true. They were very, very close to becoming true, and he felt he must warn our time period. It was essential and very urgent that he warn our time period about what was going to happen. So he said, he has an assignment for you, that he wanted me to get the book. He could see in our time period there was a book of his prophecies that had come down to our time. He wanted me to get the book and to read the quatrains to him one by one. And he would give me the English interpretation of them and tell me what they meant and what time in history they applied to. Now, when I started this out, I had no idea what a quatrain was. It's a 4-line poem. In the case of Nostradamus, it's a 4-line puzzle or prophecy. And he wrote almost 1,000 of them. Now, they have never been correctly interpreted until now. Not all of them have not. All the other books that you see out there will tell you what the names of the cities and the towns and the countries and things mean that are in the quatrain, but they won't tell you the prophecy of what it means. They won't tell you what time period. They are guessing, which is about all anybody could do, because this man had a remarkable way with puzzles. He used anagrams and symbolism. He used different languages. In those little 4 lines, it's amazing. And he even used what were called Nostradamus words. These are words that he made up as he went along. So for 400 years, people have been trying to figure out what he meant. But he was so clever. And that's why in my work we were able to break the code, and because he told us what it was. He told us what the things meant. Why not go to the source if you're going to find the answers? But it ended up, it wasn't just this woman, but it was all of them. We were successful in translating and interpreting all 1,000 of the prophecies. It's the first time it's ever been done in history. But on that night, when we were having the session, and he said, I have an assignment for you. He wanted me to do this. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this is really strange. So when the woman woke up and I told her what she had said, that she was to help me to this project of interpreting all of these, she was so frightened she moved to Alaska. She was from Alaska, and I think when all this happened, she wanted to go back quicker than she thought. She wanted to put as much distance between me and her as she could, because she didn't know what was happening. So you can't say she started it, and you can't say I started it. Something else was at work here that was to bring all of this together so that we would be able to do the interpretation. Well, before she left, I was a week or so after, we had time for one more session. And I think she was doing it more to appease me than anything else, because she definitely didn't want to be involved in this work. So the session was being held with her packing boxes and suitcases. They were having a garage sale because she said, I've only got 1 hour before they were giving a going away dinner for her. So we had to do it. I only had an hour to do the session. So, not expecting a lot, I did it again, and he came through again, and he said, you must do this work. It's very important to your time period. You have to write the books. You have to get the information out. And I said, well, how am I going to do that? She's moving away. I won't have access to her anymore. And he said, that doesn't matter. Now that we have made this connection, you will never lose me. That I will come through anybody you work with. Now that's a big order because I was working with a lot of people at that time. But he said, I will come through anybody you work with so we can get this finished and get the job done. And then he kept saying, it will be done, it will be done, it must be done. And I kept thinking, well, I guess you don't know the publishing business for one thing. I was trying to get books published back in those days. And I said, if you're that confident about it. But before he left, before the session was over, he gave me instructions on how to locate him through anybody else that I worked with. And then he also gave me a test to perform so I would know I was actually speaking to him no matter what happened after that. Well, then the woman moved away to Alaska.